Out of all the action scenes in Quantum, I think the boat chase is the worst. Again, I understand what is kind of happening, but I don't really understand how. Which brings me to the end of the boat chase. There has got to be a shot missing. The sequence tries to create more movement and excitement by piling on additional elements besides our main boats. Water is constantly splashing into the camera to create even more visual motion. You throw a second innocent boat in the foreground, and you have our main boats appear out from behind them. This is meant to generate more of a feeling of speed, giving some context as to how fast our good guy and bad guys are going in comparison to this stationary object. It would have helped to get an idea of what kind of bay they're driving around in, and the geography of where things are. There's no sense that now they're headed near some fishermen or tugboats. I mean, is Green still able to watch all this, or are they too far away now? Bond dramatically dispatches the final boat with an anchor. No idea how. I've really tried to figure out how this works, but I just can't. The bad guys leap on top of Bond's boat. I get that. Camille gets knocked out and Bond ducks. Okay. The bad guy pulls himself up, like he's about to shoot down on Bond. Fine. Bond sees the anchor and throws it into the bad guy's boat. Got it. I don't know why they needed 3 shots to show that, but whatever. The bad guy is about to make his way to the top of his boat. The anchor rope suddenly gets taut. Then the bad guy boat gets pulled out from under the bad guy, with its stern going up in the air and flipping upside down. I do not get this. I can completely understand why so many people walked out of Quantum frustrated. My guess, and here again I'm going to try to help this film, and that's another thing. Just because they don't want to spoon-feed a movie to audiences, try to make an intelligent movie and not have all the answers clear, doesn't mean I want to try to figure out all of them. The filmmakers have to do some work too. Anyway, my guess is that the hook, and that's what I should be really calling it. It's not an anchor, it's a hook Bond throws into the boat. So this hook is attached to an anchor, and Bond throws the anchor overboard. The bad guy's boat keeps moving until the anchor yanks the bad guy's boat, thus flipping it over. But we don't see Bond throw any anchor overboard. Maybe Bond accelerates his boat, driving it from out and under the bad guys. The hook snags the boat, thus flipping it in this improbable direction. But we don't see Bond accelerate his boat when the flip occurs. We see the rope uncoiling prior to the flip, yet Bond's boat is not moving any faster from out and under the bad guys. Both vehicles are in the same place and moving at the same speed when it occurs. I'm not sure what the real explanation is and how they ever missed putting a crucial shot into this big dramatic conclusion of the boat chase that they spent so much time and money on making. They use this boat flip in the trailers and commercials, but it doesn't make a lick of sense. Out of all the hyper-edited action scenes in the film, I can understand and piece together what's happening in all of them. But the boat chase, for me, is the most confusing, and I anticipate never getting a clear-cut answer to this boat flip question. This is the style for most of the action that follows throughout the rest of the film. The airplane scene, the climax in the brown, flammable hotel, and it doesn't get any better. Actually, my favorite action scene is Bond's fight with Slate. It's put together a bit better. I can appreciate the brutality that's happening between them, and there are no random cutaway shots of hotel maids or anything like that.
For instance, the knife fight at the beginning, I felt I always wanted to shoot it like wider and less cutty. Obviously, you have to cut for the momentum, but at the same time, I wanted to keep the shots pretty wide. I didn't want it to be too close. That you realize these 2 people are actually fighting. It's not 2 stunt doubles. It's actually Daniel, the actor.
I would love to get a hold of all the footage they shot for this movie and just recut the whole damn thing myself. Eon could make it a game for fans. Just throw all the footage of Quantum into some box set, market it as a cut-your-own version of Quantum, and own up to this. It's funny how I can be bothered by such a seemingly simple conclusion to an action scene, and will be looking for answers and reasons for why and how it happened the way it did, but I can easily just accept a Lotus turning into a submarine and firing a rocket at a hot chick piloting a helicopter. C'est la vie. So to sum this tirade on the editing of Quantum up, we have extremely ridiculously short shot lengths, intercut with random cutaway shots. The angles and point of views jump from one place to another. Oh, and let's film all that with shaky handheld camera work. It ends up being a dizzying series of action sequences that I just didn't like at all. And most people didn't. There was a reason why everybody was talking about the editing of this afterwards. Damn. $200 million they spent on this movie, and they couldn't even buy a tripod. Amazing. Alright, where are we in this? At the conclusion of the boat chase, Bond reports in. M and the new Tanner ID Dominic Green. Forster throws in some more artistic flourishes here. Suddenly, the windshield of Bond's truck he swiped has inherited some of the graphics from MI6's high-tech table and their big computer screen wall. Okay. Green is heading to Austria. Bond is going to follow him, and M warns him not to kill any more leads. I'm in complete agreement with her. We got to get a story going on here. Now, it's really not that complicated. A lot of people have talked about the confusion of the plot. They walked out of Quantum not understanding the story and were just left befuddled by what was going on. I think we can sum it up with two exchanges in the film.
We do nothing to stop a coup in Bolivia, and in exchange, the new government gives America the least standing oil found.
If it's oil you want. As of this moment, my organization owns more than 60% of Bolivia's water supply. So this contract states that your new government will use us as utilities provider.
This is double what we are paying now.
That's pretty much it. Green has taken Bolivia's water and is now holding it for ransom, for higher prices. I get the whole environmental slant on the character of Green and this devious plot, but it's not told in any kind of interesting way. Our bad guy is someone who wears suits and has meetings. There's not a lot of dynamic devilry going on. Maybe they could have jazzed this up by having Green in the middle of overseeing the diversion of water underground. Yeah, images of A View to a Kill are flashing in my head as I say that, but at least he would have something to do other than sit around with his buggy eyes. There he is in charge of exploiting all these Bolivian workers who are unknowingly assisting in their own country's loss of water to Quantum. He could have done more villainy things instead of just this wacky move.
Is he one of ours?
No?
Then he shouldn't be looking at me.
I always thought that was a really strange moment. He shouldn't be looking at me. That might have given us some memorable scenes. Big sets with lots of extras milling about for the climax. Forster could have done his water action scene as Bond breaks up the place, ruining Quantum's plans, releasing the water back to the people. They could have done something to get us more involved with this whole thing. It just comes down to the general signing a contract. Here's another strange thing. As Green makes his agreement with the CIA to stay out of his way, he also asks them to get rid of Bond for him.
It's James Bond, British Secret Service. I don't know how I could have missed that.
I will need you to get rid of him for me.
Yeah. That's not gonna be a problem.
I don't know where that goes, since that threat never seems to come up against Bond. The CIA tries to catch Bond later in that one scene, and that's only because Bond goes to their office. No one from the CIA is ever trying to track him down or anything. That might have had some dramatic potential had Felix been assigned to find Bond and eliminate him. His conscience would be pulling him both ways between his orders to kill his new blonde friend and with the agency where he doesn't agree with the decisions being made, but hey, his career, man. Maybe then the return of Felix would have been more compelling, instead of him just sitting off to the side. Like here at Green's party. Just another random cutaway shot. Like with this again, they could have elevated the stakes for Bond through the story. Give him something else to contend with. But that CIA threat just vanishes, and then pops up for one scene, and that's it. Sometimes I suspect Quantum must have been drastically cut down, or one of those earlier scripts had much more going on in it. They just tried to whittle things down to the bare essentials to make the movie so short later on. They wouldn't cut out the action scenes, so This seemingly simple story just plays out as a jumbled mess, with unresolved half-assed subplots going on that don't add anything other than more distraction. The one good thing about this scene is that Beam gets a good line to cap it off.
You know who Green is and you want to put us in bed with him. You aren't kidding, right?
Yeah, you're right. We should just deal with nice people.
There's not a lot of humor in Quantum, so it's refreshing to hear something light. Although there's another meaningless cutaway shot of the stewardess pouring a drink. You could laugh at that during this flight. Wow, this review has just been a chorus of me griping about everything in Quantum. Well, I got some positive things here, since the opera scene is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I still have complaints about it, though. As Bond arrives in Austria, he follows Green to the opera. It gets off to a shaky start with blazy establishing shots of the outside of the place. I can't get a handle on the layout of this joint. Bond easily slips in through the back entrance. That's always the best way to crash into a joint. Just look like you belong. He borrows a tux, snags a Quantum goodie bag, puts in the earpiece, and is ready for some eavesdropping. I like how Craig casually breaks and tosses the bathroom handle to the side. Pretty smooth. He looks out over this crowd, and this is the closest the movie gets to what I was expecting to see. We know Quantum is powerful and mysterious. We have no idea who is connected with them. Bond doesn't know who the bad guys are. This is how I envisioned things would start out in Quantum. Bond is literally in the dark about them, and then gradually through the story, he's able to cast light on them, and they start falling like dominoes. Even though Bond is able to ID a few guys with a nifty 3D camera somehow, their identities are pretty much moot. They never come into play. Oh, we're told later this one guy...
He keeps a very low profile, but is one of the Prime Minister's closest advisors.
But we never hear about this guy again.
I don't think I need to tell you how upset the PM is.
With respect, the PM has my direct line.
And he'd have used it if he'd wanted to speak to you.
This is the world's most precious resource. We need to control as much of it as we can.
There's the hint that Green has something sinister brewing. The few Quantum members Bond IDs are pointless in the movie. We get another arty, fast-cut, woozy shootout. This time the sound drops out at one point. And like the foot chase, it's intercut with the centerpiece attraction taking place. This time, the opera performance. An undercover agent is killed by Green's bad guys, which Bond takes the heat for. As a result, M orders him to come in and cancels his credit cards. Losing your 00 credit card is really strict punishment. Oh, and this is the last we see of Mr. White, the bad guy who I'm really starting to think should have been the main villain in Quantum, or at least played a more crucial role in this. So long, Mr. White. We hardly knew you. Really, we didn't get to know you at all. You seem like you could have been cool. Happy trails. By the way, we all know M has gotten more and more important in the movies for a while now. It's become a recurring idea of, hey, we have Judi Dench. Let's use her more. But I don't know why we're getting so intimate with her now. She's taking off her makeup, running a bath. Whatever happened to M just sitting behind a desk and playing the role of an authority figure? I don't know if we have to see all this or what it adds to her character. That sometimes she works from home? I mean, we never saw Bernard Lee barking orders while sitting on the bowl. Desperate for help, Bond pays a visit to Mathis. Something of a rough reunion since Bond thought he was a traitor and had him sweated out with MI6. Fortunately, Mathis was proved innocent and was given this Italian villa to enjoy his retirement. I'm not sure if the chick was included in that package. So he helps identify some of the people on the Quantum guest list. Apparently some heavy hitters. We never hear about these guys again, though. Mathis does say a pretty interesting line.
But I guess when one's young, it seems very easy to distinguish between right and wrong. But as one gets older, it becomes more difficult. The villains and the heroes get all mixed up.
This seemed like it would be an important part of Bond's journey. Actually, it's part of the whole landscape of the story.
You know who Green is and you want to put us in bed with him. You aren't kidding, right?
Especially since he was a member of Special Branch.
So who is he guarding?
If we refuse to do business with villains, we'd have almost no one to trade with.
Are you sure you're playing with the right side?
The good and bad are willing to work together as long as it will benefit themselves. But there really aren't any dramatic repercussions for those playing both sides of the fence in the end. Beam getting canned is pretty much it.
Your friend Light has been promoted. He replaced Beam.
After having set out to unravel Quantum, Bond doesn't shed any more clarity on who the heroes and villains are as when we started out. It's frustrating. All those members he identified at the opera, I guess they just go on doing evil things. He doesn't make any more progress from standing there in the dark looking out on all these anonymous faces. Oh, in the end, he does supposedly get some information about Quantum from Green.
I answered your questions. I told you what you wanted to know about Quantum.
Yes, you did.
Well, I would have liked to have heard some of that. I don't feel I learned anything new about Quantum from the beginning. I get that the filmmakers wanted maybe to keep some things vague about them, so they didn't paint themselves in a corner if they chose to use Quantum again in a future film. But you gotta give us something. It's nice to see the return of Mathis. I really would have liked if his presence was actually a bigger part of the story and he had something more to do though. The biggest thing he does is comment about Vespa to Bond. Oh, he does get Bond his passport and introduces him to his connections in Bolivia. We'll get to that in a bit. But I think they just might have thought it was just cool to bring that character back. This villa scene is kind of funny, actually. Forster manages to make even this simple scene strange. These two guys are talking, and then this chick says,
Amore, dai, vieni, voglio sentire le tue mani sulla schiena.
I want your hands on my skin. That's pretty subtle. I often have chicks telling me that when I'm entertaining guests. What a shock. We get another peculiar cutaway to end the scene on, of this chick looking at Bond polishing off his drink. I think this is meant to convey that she's looking for Mathis and he's not sitting at the table anymore. So perhaps this is a visual cue that Mathis has now agreed to go with Bond and help him, and he went off to pack his stuff. It comes off as so nutty. Maybe if helping Bond was something he was really unsure of doing, it takes some coercion on Bond's part and it really starts to look like Mathis will be staying put, rubbing down this chick. But that exchange is much more matter of fact. Come with me. He's just thinking about it for a second. Anyway, this cutaway feels too brief to carry any importance anyway. So it momentarily hangs there and ends the scene on a weird note. I guess Forster doesn't like using a lot of establishing shots. We're not shown the outside of the plane. So the inside shot, for some reason, it just looks a little oddball to me. Bond and Mathis talking, it's good. We're reminded of Vespa again and that Bond is still hung up on her, and they get to mention Bond's drink. But I don't do that much traveling, but this setup looks strange. There's Bond sitting at the bar, and I guess it's right in front of all the passengers sleeping, like that's them in the foreground. Like that's how this works? It's like he's sitting in the middle of a slumber party. Forster could have used one of those location cards for this. Agent Fields greets Bond and she has instructions to fly him back to London. A lethal, dangerous 00 agent on one side, and a girl who works in an office collecting reports on the other. It doesn't seem like too even a match. You could easily gripe about what a ludicrous decision this was to send Fields to try and reel in 007. How many agents does M use on Bond to bring him back? 1, 2, 3, 4. But you know what? What the heck? You need some suspension of disbelief, so I'll accept that M sent a cute redhead in a trench coat and fashionable boots to escort this out-of-control agent back to London.
She was just supposed to send you home. She worked in an office, collecting reports.
I'll roll with it. Maybe she was the only one at the office who wasn't busy. This little thing always bugged me. I'm just not going to stop with this. They have a talkative taxi driver on the way to the hotel. And apparently Forster decided we had to know every little thing the guy is rambling about. It gets so ridiculous. We even get his subtitles cross over into Mathis's. Like, what's the focus here? What's the important information? Are we meant to keep track of all of this? As a result, the two significant brief tidbits from the driver and Mathis gets drowned out by each other. Even simple dialogue scenes, Forster has to overly complicate. I don't know what the rationale is for this. Give more of a Bolivian flavor to it by listening to this taxi driver? Listening to just one person talk would bore us, so let's throw in another one on top of him. Let me play the late great Peter Hunt and try to roughly recut this to clear things up.
She has handcuffs.
Do hope so.
He blames the water shortage on global warming. The colonel, who heads the national police.
I mean, that's a little better. Maybe I'm the only one bothered by this. Luckily, when they ultimately arrive at Bond's choice of hotel, he has a funny line.
Hola, somos maestros on año sabbatical. Y nos ganamos la lotería. Felicidades, señor.
There's that at least. It doesn't take long for Bond to shag Fields. Of course, yes, Bond is expected to have sex with some beauties in all his movies. But in this one, I don't think he had to. Repeating myself here again. Bond is out to avenge the death of Vespa, the woman he loved. He's carrying around her necklace with him like a chain around his heart. Ooh, that sounds kind of poetic, actually. Him having a romp with an MI6 intern, or whoever she is, takes some of the air out of that emotional balloon. Plus, this seemed pointless for him to do in the context of the story anyway. Bond would usually lay down with a lovely lady in order to get some information out of her. There's some ulterior motivation for him to do it. Remember him and Solange?
I'm also afraid you will sleep with me in order to get to him.
Here, there's really nothing for him to gain from getting all kissy with Fields. Well, I mean, he's probably enjoying himself. It's the first time in the whole movie he doesn't have a puss on his face. He's already disobeying Fields, and she wasn't putting up much of a fight with the change of hotels he decided on. She doesn't have any kind of connections he can use to get the green. Along with him being obsessed with Vespa and wanting to take down Quantum, some recreational hanky-panky doesn't seem to fit in with this solitary Bond on a personal mission, even if he's just doing it to kill time. And we never see him actually seduce Fields. Later we hear M talk about his charms, but we're never allowed to see that.
Look how well your charm works, James. They'll do anything for you, won't they? How many is that now?
Where's his manipulation of Fields? That 007 magnetism that melts her icy demeanor down? That charisma that he can use as a weapon? I don't really count his stationary line as much of an enticement.
I can't find the stationery. Come and help me look.
Or was that it? That's all it took? If that was it, then Fields must be the easiest redhead to score with in the entire world. I gotta try that line one day, see how it works. Bond and Fields arrive at Green's Eco Park fundraiser. They listen to Green give a BS speech about his concern for the environment, with arbitrary cutaways to guests. We should be used to this by now. Oh, plus Felix and Beam are in attendance, just sitting there. Perhaps we could start to play out that threat of the CIA on Bond's tail the minute Felix spots Bond. Maybe Felix would pretend not to see Bond, but then Beam does, and he'd start to put together a plan of attack that, begrudgingly, Felix pretends to go along with. No, don't worry about that happening tonight. It must be their night off. Just sit and relax, boys. So at this party, for some reason, Camille shows up. I'm not sure why. Let's recount what she's been up to. She survived Green trying to have her killed. Then she went back to him. Green passed her over to the General, which Bond rescued her from and caused quite a commotion. Now she arrives to embarrass Green in front of his friends. So what does she expect to happen here? That Green will take her to the General again? That he will fall in love with her? What a surprise, he almost tries to kill her before Bond steps in. I'm really annoyed with this chick. Strong Bond woman, nothing. Since first meeting Green, we've been getting clued in on this bowl-cut guy who stands around next to him. At first, you might have thought that this guy was just another unimportant person Forster decided to cut away to indiscriminately during scenes. But no. This guy is actually Green's henchman named Elvis. It wasn't until I watched the documentary about the making of Quantum when I learned this guy was meant to inhabit the henchman role.
My name is Anatol Taubman. I play Elvis, Dominic Green's henchman, sidekick, associate, cousin.
That's the only way I think I would have ever found out, since he does nothing in this movie. Maybe they intended to give him more stuff to do, but because the script was all over the place, they just forgot about him or something. The only thing memorable about him is he has that Dumb and Dumber haircut. Oh, and he gets tripped by Fields. Yes, Fields takes him out.
He has something going on with the hair, but we don't want to give that away yet.
I guess the hair is a toupee. Okie dokie. So when you make your favorite Bond henchman list, remember to include the hair-raising, treacherous figure of Elvis. Make sure you leave a slot for him. He really gives me goosebumps. So Bond and Camille leave Green's shindig. Does anyone else think that this party scene seemed kind of pointless? I'm not sure what we learned from it. It used to be Bond would go to a party, a casino, some meeting, or just be sneaking around, and it would serve a purpose in the story. He would see something, find a clue. There would be something dropped in the scene to not only show how cool and smart Bond is, but to move the story along and help him get to his ultimate objective. Here, I don't know. We hear Green talking about this Tierra project thing, which really doesn't seem like a big secret since apparently everyone at this party is there to contribute to it. Bond meets the Colonel, who will be responsible for the death of Mathis, and becomes another background bad guy. An unnecessary one if you ask me. And Bond asks Camille to show him the Tierra project. The whole party scene feels like a long way to go for very little. Bond and Camille are out on the road and they get stopped by the local police who have stashed a bloodied Mathis inside Bond's trunk. A little gunplay, Bond kills the two cops, and Mathis gets shot. It's a nice moment with Bond holding Mathis. Then they start talking, and things get hazy.
Is Mathis your cover name?
Yes.
Not a very good one, is it?
What does this mean? I don't know. I'm not even going to bother speculating on this dialogue. I'm getting sick of doing that with this movie. I'll only say it has left me puzzled, and I'm not sure what exactly him admitting Mathis is his cover name means, or what or if it has any kind of significance to his assistance to Bond. I know some people were left confused by that little trick of Le Chiffre in Casino when he says to Bond, "Your friend Mathis is really my friend Mathis." That's simple. He's just trying to trick Bond and keep suspicion off Vespa. This one here, no clue. Could Bond be referring to the name Mathis used when dealing with the Colonel? Meaning he used his real name Mathis with the Colonel, which explains why Bond would say,
Not a very good one, is it?
So Mathis didn't even think up a fake name for himself when dealing with that bad guy? I'm stopping. I spent too much time on this. Whatever the explanation is, it's not clear. I can't figure it out. And it just ends up confusing Mathis's final moments. If you have any theories, let me know. After that head-scratching moment, it's a nice scene with Bond holding his friend and Mathis offering up final advice to forgive Vespa and himself. It ends with Bond dropping the dead Mathis in a garbage bin. I don't get it. I don't know why he does it. What is the upside to this, other than just leaving him in the street? Moving him away from traffic and the bad guys, maybe? It's almost there just for a pointless example to show how cold and hardened Bond can be, even with his dead friends. It would have been a nice bit of irony if Bond used Mathis's own advice in Casino Royale regarding being dead.
I hate to say it, but the accountants seem to be running MI6 these days.
His legend precedes him, the way lightning precedes thunder. He is the most interesting man in the world.
But I guess when one's young, It seems very easy to distinguish between right and wrong. Being dead doesn't mean one can't still be helpful.
And he uses Mathis's body in some way to help his mission. But I don't see how tossing him in the garbage does that. The only thing I understand what would help him in his mission is taking the money out of his wallet. Maybe the trashing of Mathis was like it's been speculated by some fans, for Bond to complicate the crime scene and buy him some time. But we're never shown any delay in the investigation. Besides, the Colonel, the guy in charge of the police, is the one who planned Bond's traffic stop, so it's likely he'd know instantly what happened there just by being told of it. The next thing we hear about it is Tanner informing M that Mathis was found dead.
Rene Mathis has been shot dead in Bolivia. The police claim it was Bond.
Oh, I can't let this one little scene just pass. Check this out, how this is all put together. Tanner tells M the news via his little camera, and he pops up on M's computer. And then M looks off through her clear video wall at him, sitting at his desk. Another really strange choice. First time I saw this, I didn't know what was going on. He's giving her some important information, so I don't know why they wouldn't keep the camera on him instead of this very strange shot. Unnecessarily arty. I don't get it. Confusion. Where's simplicity? Where? Anyway, if Mathis had indeed betrayed Bond, then him getting dumped in the trash would make some sense. Bond's showing no respect to this guy who sold him out. But Mathis didn't sell him out, and when he's holding him, Bond appears to be genuinely hurt his friend is about to die. Or was Mathis indeed a traitor? Could he have been a triple agent? Did he do something underhanded that just wasn't made clear? And what's with the cover name? They're not trying to insinuate that James Bond cover name thing again, are they? Am I missing something here? It's just another moment in the film that left me confused. Why would you throw your friend in the bin?
He wouldn't care.
Well, yeah, okay, but why couldn't you just leave him on the street?
He wouldn't care.
But maybe you could just leave him lying next to the bin and not throw him inside it.
He wouldn't care.
Right, but it just seems like a meaningless action to do this to your friend.
He wouldn't care.
I know he wouldn't care, but I care. I like the dude. He could have stayed with that wacky chick rubbing her skin at the villa, but he was helping you out by coming all the way to Bolivia.
He wouldn't care.
Forget it. They could have kept Mathis alive to possibly pop up again in future films. Bond is in Europe, he can give Mathis a jingle. He could be like his Sala. I don't even mind that they killed Mathis off, had he played a more important role in this. What'd he do? He ID'd some bad guys that never come into play, got Bond a passport, snagged him an invite to a party where nothing happens, briefly introduced Bond to this colonel, gets killed the next time we see him, and had a puzzling death scene that added more confusion to things. It wasn't much of a return appearance. Bond is usually on top of things and pretty smart, so he knows this guy that they get the plane from is gonna sell them out.
Well, he wanted you, but I left him the car as collateral. He'll make much more when he sells us out.
So why not knock the guy out, or tie him up, at least rip the phone out of the wall? I guess Bond is purposely looking for some trouble during this flight. We learn Camille used to be Bolivian Secret Service. It doesn't make her any more interesting to me. I'm sorry. Flash, whiz, gunfire, swoop, explosions, blurs. I've talked all about this. The climax to this woozy sequence is Camille and Bond free-falling with one parachute. I know Forster took great pride in the fact that they went to this wind tunnel to capture the look of a more authentic free-fall on their faces, but I don't think it turned out as good as it should have. Their fall only lasts literally like 30 seconds, and I suppose that's more realistic than extended freefall drops we've seen in other films, but it looks a bit too cartoony for my taste. I don't like it as much as older freefall sequences where they relied on wide shots of stunt guys falling, cut with close-ups of the actor with solid blue backgrounds behind them, and hairdryers aimed at their faces. Yeah, Point Break did the same kind of last-second chute opening landing much better. M is called to see the minister, and he talks about how the PM is mad. Green and their government's interests align. He doubts that Green is a bad guy, and even if he is, he rationalizes they would have to work with him anyway. They're in desperate need of oil. M is ordered to bring Bond in, or the Americans will kill him. There's a lot of good stuff. Unfortunately, it doesn't really play out or up the stakes of what's happening for Bond or the story. This is a scene I would think would be more towards the middle of the film. Once Bond is out there with M questioning his actions after some dubious encounters with members of Quantum, is he doing what he's doing because of his mission, or is he out of control, just bent on exacting retribution on those for Vespa?
Pull him in, or the Americans will put him down.
Now it's time to put even more heat on Bond with his own government and the CIA to begin gunning for him. His plate starts to get pretty full. Instead, this is a half hour before the end of the movie, and none of what the minister says comes into play. We never find out if this dude Guy Haines is influencing the PM with his decisions on this, if the government ultimately recognizes the existence of Quantum, or if they will just continue to do business with them, or if there will be any repercussions for those who knowingly were in bed with them. The CIA just hangs out in Bolivia and never seems to be trying to stop Bond. This ends up as simply a scene of M getting lectured. Hanging out in a sinkhole, Camille reveals her troubled past with the general.
He shot my father. He did things to my mother and my sister. And I strangled them while I watched.
Don't care. I'm sorry. I just don't care about this character, and I'm not interested in her story. I was more fixated on listening to Honey talk about selling her seashells.
This one is worth $50 in Miami. 50.
I don't really know what it is about this chick. Her story is just nothing special. I don't know anything about her other than this revenge thing of hers. I mean, does she even have a personality? She doesn't have any kind of chemistry with Bond, and she just feels like a distraction in all this. There are more distractions in Quantum than an actual story. It's crazy. They could have dropped so much of what's happening here and stuck with a simplified, slick story that drives like a bullet to the end. Instead, it's all these detours into crap and characters, and the basic story of Bond finding who is responsible for Vespa's death gets completely lost. Bond then literally stumbles onto the big secret of Green's, which is, he's not after oil, but Bolivia's water supply. After helping with a coup allowing the general to take power, Quantum is now in control of more than 60% of Bolivia's water supply, and will now make a nice profit overcharging this new government for it. Those little scamps. The repercussions of Green's plan on the population is shown via an arty stroll that Camille and Bond take. M is back now to personally take Bond back to London.
You said you weren't motivated by revenge.
I'm motivated by my duty.
No. I think you're so blinded by inconsolable rage that you don't care who you hurt.
Bond learns Fields is dead, Goldfinger style in oil. I'm not usually a fan of blatant references to past Bond films, but I kinda dig this. It's a nice tweak and update, and although it's clearly a homage to Shirley Eaton's death, it still leaves a visual impact. The only bad thing is that Forster doesn't give us a chance to appreciate it. As with most things in Quantum, the shot is rushed. He could have left the camera on her for a little bit longer, after all the time they must have spent setting up this death scene. These dissolves just ruin it. Bond is escorted out by agents, the elevator door closes, and... Huh? What's going on? Huh? The first time I saw this, I wasn't even sure how many agents Bond takes out here. I think it's 3. With a few dozen quick, confusing cuts, Bond is the last man standing. Anyone can be an action star with this rapid editing and handheld camera work that have become so popular nowadays. It's just a blur of action, limbs flailing around, bodies hitting the floor, and ta-da! That's all that needs to be said. Don't mess with them. You don't even have to look the part of an action hero today. Just let the editing and wobbly camera do all the work. You don't really have to choreograph the fight either. We'll just put that together later. Just swing your arms back and forth and... action. If you want to see a better Bond fight in an elevator, watch the scene from Diamonds Are Forever. Connery only fights one guy, but it's much, much more exciting than this.
There's nowhere to go. There's a capture or kill order out on you.
Who would have done that?
Bond escapes, and for some reason, M does a complete turnaround from her intention of putting a stop to Bond's rampage, to now letting him go.
Find out where he's going. He's onto something.
Mom, the CIA is insisting.
I don't give a shit about the CIA or their trumped-up evidence. He's my agent, and I trust him.
I'm not sure what happened. Maybe there was a phone call off screen that reignited her trust of him, or made her reconsider the repercussions of what will happen to her if she doesn't stop her agent. It's a mystery, and we'll never know the answer. Unless just saying the script says she now goes back to trusting Bond is enough for you. What's funny about this is another little drop thing. M tells Tanner to find out where Bond is going. Apparently Tanner loses Bond, because we never see M being informed that Bond is going to Hotel Desert to confront Green. Guess it's unimportant anyway. After a quick visit with Felix, telling Bond all the baddies are getting together at Hotel Desert, Bond escapes the CIA's one attempt at capturing him. They were a real menace to Bond. It's a good thing he took it upon himself to go to their office, or else they would have had absolutely nothing to do. Green's Hotel is a strange locale. This hotel is technically a real hotel to accommodate workers of the European Southern Observatory, so people do stay there. And it is pretty cool looking sitting there in this empty desert, so I can understand why the filmmakers decided to use it. But the way the movie says
Green's bringing him his money now. A hotel called the Perla de las Dunas in the desert.
And then seeing it makes me go, what? It's somewhat a surreal way to use this place in the movie. Almost everyone I've talked with about Quantum couldn't get a handle on why would anyone build a hotel in the desert. Saying it's a hotel makes it sound like they have brochures and ice machines and package deals for tourists. I guess I can roll with it, but it's very odd. Even if this hotel was built by the bad guys, made for the sole purpose of it being used exclusively only by them, it's still pretty weird. I would have swallowed it easier if Felix had just said, "The bad guys are all meeting at their hideout in the desert." Our disorienting story culminates as Bond and Camille arrive at the hotel and set the baddies in their sights. We get a quiet moment between Bond and Camille as he offers her advice as to how to go about this personal kill. It's not a bad little scene. There's this big build-up to this meeting, where all the bad guys are coming together with the booming music and the long walk Green makes. We're supposed to feel real tension now that they're all going to be in one place and Bond is on his way. But somehow it all feels very anticlimactic. Since meeting the General, we haven't seen him do much devilish stuff. He's given off sinister looks now and then, but he's also getting screwed over by Green with this desert deal. We're told of the horrible things he did to Camille's family years ago, but I think the filmmakers felt they needed some more visceral examples to convince us that this guy deserves to die. So they have him target this one hotel employee. She's the only one apparently working in this joint. And to show us what a despicable guy he is. The General attacking this chick is supposed to mirror his crimes he committed against Camille's family, and demonstrate that Camille wanting to kill him is pretty reasonable. It feels too little, too late for me. And again, it doesn't make me care about Camille's journey or having the General get his comeuppance. And I'm going to repeat myself again. This Camille General story is just interrupting Bond's confrontation with Green now. And I hate it. Explosions rock through this combustible hotel. I guess the explanation for this is some kind of hydrogen fuel cells that power the joint. So I suppose it's like a Hindenburg thing happening here.
It's terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. All the humanity and all of...
And it looks like a lot of this place is made of wood, too. Parts of it look kind of woodish. The way the place is burning, it's like wood soaked in gasoline. Oh, Elvis gets killed in an explosion. As if anyone cared. Watching these two fights, I just don't feel connected to either one of them. The Camille one, you know how I feel about that. But even Bond and Green is swinging an axe, explosions going off everywhere. I don't feel like there was any build-up in the movie to this fight between Bond and Green. that Green is the key to finding out more about Quantum. It's like a lot of this movie has been teasing us with anticipation leading up to things, but it never delivers or sells the importance of it. There are a couple good shots here, with Bond leaping through the broken window, the scaffolding falling, but it's mainly me just watching two sets of fights, with fire going off all around, and I feel very removed from it all. In the end, Camille kills the general. Bond gets his info from Green, and leaves him out in the desert. Now after having killed the general, Camille doesn't know what to do, so Bond suggests she can use her knowledge she learned from Green to help undam the water or something. I don't know. And finally, she departs. So leaves the most forgettable Bond girl ever. Finally. In Russia, Bond confronts Vespa's boyfriend, as he's clearly making a play with another hot chick who works inside a government agency. This chick Corinne is pretty cute, by the way. Wish they had more of her in this flick. He informs M he didn't kill the guy, that she was right about Vespa.
Bond, I need you back.
I never left.
He symbolically throws Vespa's necklace away, and that's meant to show he is now able to move on and has found his solace. It really was a long, convoluted road to get to that. Oh boy. This was not a good Bond movie. And I am calling it a Bond movie. There was a lot of criticism about Quantum not feeling like a Bond movie. Plenty of fans described it as a Bourne knockoff, and not having the same elements that a Bond movie is supposed to have. The women, the gadgets, the romance, the humor, the fantasy world, the ultimate hero. And agreed, Quantum doesn't have a lot of that. But I still consider it a James Bond movie. It stars James Bond, and it's part of the official series. So whether I like it or not, it's a James Bond movie. Just a really, really bad one. I can't say it's worse than Die Another Day. For one thing, I don't like having to take back that trophy of worst Bond movie from it. It earned it. Although I can see how some fans would christen Quantum as the worst. The legendary bad Bond movies like Die Another Day and Moonraker, and I'm not a big Moonraker hater by the way, and the way they're viewed by fans, they're both perceived so epically bad and ridiculous that they become memorable. You can instantly think of awful moments from them, and automatically you're pulled immediately back into the distressing experience of watching them. Quantum is bad on a different level. It's completely joyless and forgettable. It's so incredibly dull, it doesn't reach the heights of a monumental disaster. It's just a numbing experience that leaves me feeling nothing. So I wouldn't call it the worst Bond film, but it is the most disappointing. After Casino Royale, and then hearing Quantum would be a sequel to it, I was so excited for it. I had such high hopes. I really wanted to love it. Then when I saw it, it was one of the biggest downers I've experienced in the Bond series. For those who like Quantum, cool. I really wish I was in your boat. But I'm not. For a Bond revenge movie, I'll take License to Kill over Quantum any day. There are a few things I like in Quantum. A few. Bond's fight with Slate, the bike flip, the dead geologist, Bond getting his hotel message, that was pretty cool. Bond and Camille getting ready to go to that hotel, that bathroom handle toss. Most of these are just moments though, and aren't enough to make me geared up to watch this movie again. All the actors here I think are pretty good. A lot of the returning actors from Casino Royale show up and they're a treat to see. It would have been a lot better if they were given something to do though. None of them have much to work with. None are given clear motivations and they just pop up and do what the story needs them to do to move things along, which is never in a clear direction anyway. Some characters were completely unnecessary. Olga just goes back and forth with Green the entire movie with no clear plan. No wonder it's taken her this long to kill the general. Doesn't seem like she knows what the heck she's doing. Amalric is a great actor in smaller art house films, but as a Bond villain, he's not scary or charismatic. There's not even any satisfactory catharsis when Bond finally meets him and they have their big final confrontation. Seeing Daniel Craig the second time around made me geared up to see where he was going to go with 007. Unfortunately, despite looking the part and ready to get to work, he's given very little to say or react to. Quantum might offer more action set pieces for Craig to do, but he gets lost in the rapid editing of them. There's very little time spent on Bond's motives for revenge, and how it ties to Green and Quantum. Mr. White was the main connection we knew from Casino Royale. We're teased with this big quantum organization in the opera scene. But then the movie throws all of that aside.
Where the movie ends right now, there was another scene after that.
Oh yeah, that deleted ending that Forster shot but was never used, with Bond encountering Guy Haines and Mr. White, that would have finally picked up their story threads. I never saw the actual 1-minute scene, but supposedly it would have showed us Bond continuing to move up the ranks of Quantum by catching up with Guy Haines, and teasing us with future adventures with them. Quantum would be the new Spectre. As enticing as the idea sounds and the possible setup for another direct sequel, it wouldn't have helped or saved what came before in the movie. It's a good thing it was deleted, and it wasn't the closing scene. I probably would have just felt even more frustrated by seeing it. Oh, now you're bringing these guys out? Where were they an hour ago? By the end of this, I guess the lesson Bond has learned is it's not always beneficial to kill.
Please. Make it quick.
But didn't he learn that in Casino?
Any thug can kill.
The big picture.
Is he still alive?
He is.
I'm surprised.
There are naturally multi-locations going on, and I really do like some of them. Location cards and all. And I don't even mind the color palette of browns, blacks, and whites that Forster decided to use. It has sort of a retro modern mesh to it. Yeah, I can see that. And most of it all looks visually cool. It's a pretty nice looking movie. But what actually takes place in those locations are either dull, rushed through, or completely confusing. It all becomes a joyless, chaotic experience with no wit or sharp dialogue. Just a movie that floats along without a clear story that's punctuated by those loud whiz, bang, crash action sequences that are not fun to watch. I still find it hard to believe Quantum's budget was in the neighborhood of $200 million. I watched this movie and I just don't see it. What did they spend it all on? I don't see it on screen. I realize filming in the desert is costly, but was that it? This has got to be the brownest looking James Bond movie ever. I don't think it's a mystery to what happened here and how things started to spiral out of control to result in this mess. It all goes back to the beginning, with that craziness involving the script and the rush to make this movie. Had they taken more time with it, and not had been in such a mad scramble to start production before that writer's strike hit, I think Quantum could have turned out much better. What can you expect when you show up to the set and the actors and the director are trying to make it up as they go? It's crazy. I'd be shocked if they ever attempted another Bond sequel again. They goofed this up so bad, I doubt they'd ever even consider doing it again. Bond films are huge productions, and I can't imagine if they start making one with such a hasty atmosphere in the beginning. It's a long shot that the movie will result in anything other than a disaster, and I think that's what happened. I still get amused by the idea of the selection of the title, Quantum of Solace. Yes, it's a title to a Fleming short story, but even the choice of that was last minute.
We just decided a few days ago.
But this one is an original Fleming title, and that was very important to us, and it really suits the film, so that's why we chose it.
It just seemed like they were trying to sell it without being able to back up the importance of its meaning to anything in their movie. You compare that to when the title Skyfall was announced, and after seeing the movie, learning what the meaning of it was and getting that light bulb moment after all that wondering. With Quantum of Solace, people were still left wondering after seeing the movie. Even the president of Columbia, who were distributing Quantum with MGM, was quoted as saying he wasn't a fan of the title. He and his colleagues were finally won over by it when they realized Bond's 007 number could be inserted graphically into the title. Hence, it would help with the marketing of the movie. That's a real great reason for a title selection. Then we had the choice of Forster as director. He didn't have a background in big action productions, and with things being so shaky already when he signed on, that did him no favors. Had this just been a standalone Bond movie, Forster might not have been on the list of directors. But possibly because of the emotional tone the movie was going to run with from Casino Royale, the idea of hiring Forster seemed like it could work. It didn't. In Forster's defense, and I doubt I will ever utter that statement again regarding Forster and Quantum, the second unit shooting finished on June 12th, leaving Forster only 6 weeks to cut the movie, giving him only a fraction of the months-long period usually given for post-production. Forster had said there was just way too little time for post. That kind of stress I'm not really used to. I don't ever want to do that again. It's yet another example of how rushed everything on Quantum was.
A huge amount of bravery and a huge amount of visual flair, which is what we wanted from the movie, and we had to, we had a lot to compete with Casino Royale, so it was he had a lot to live up to, but he certainly did.
It's hard for me to judge what kind of stamp I'm going to put on this movie. I think I let the audience decide that. I just have my vision of the film and will pull that through and make the movie I think is the most interesting and most fascinating to watch.
I'm not sure Forster's stylistic and decorative vision for a Bond film was appropriate either. In some instances, some of his arty flourishes work reasonably well, but overall they look out of place in a Bond movie and they just become too much. Then to compound the fact, he didn't seem to have any kind of vision for the action, and relied on rapidly cut Bourne-influenced action scenes that were almost unbearable to watch. I found it really amusing after Quantum premiered that Forster said he already declined directing the next Bond film, and eventually became more and more adamant he didn't want to do another Bond movie again. I've become suspicious of the supposed offer by Mike and Babs asking him to direct again. After the fallout of Quantum and the criticism it got, I'd be wary they were so keen on hiring him again. Plus the fact it didn't seem Forster was too happy with his experience working on Quantum. I suspect it was more of a friendly PR decision to say he was asked, and not as genuine an offer as he made it sound. But I'm just theorizing here. I have a feeling had Forster been signed to direct Bond 23, the majority of fans would not have been too happy with it. In fact, who would have caused the more outrage if they were to return to direct the next Bond film? Forster or Lee Tamahora? You have to choose one. However genuine an offer that was made, Forster would not be involved in Bond 23, and the producers would return to the tradition of hiring a British-born director. Casino Royale took in over $590 million at the box office, making it the highest grossing of all Bond films to date. Quantum managed to rise to that challenge, and while not quite beating that record set by the previous film, it still took in $586 million worldwide. Despite the financial success, Quantum had its share of critics, not even counting Bond fans. Martin Campbell said he felt Quantum completely lost its way. Roger Moore naturally chimed in, saying he enjoyed Daniel Craig, he thinks he's a damn good Bond, but the film as a whole, there was a bit too much flash cutting for me. It was just like a commercial of the action. There didn't seem to be any geography, and you were wondering what the hell was going on. But there you are. Call me old-fashioned and an old fuddy-duddy. Even Daniel Craig eventually came out, essentially saying he wasn't happy with the final results of Quantum, saying he would want to do better next time. He pointed to the writer's strike as a major factor with the disappointing results, and confessing when they started, they only had the bare bones of a script. He and Forster were forced to rewrite scenes themselves, with him admitting, "A writer I am not." And many of the decisions were being made on the fly and at the last second. Interestingly, he also mentioned that Quantum was never meant to be as much of a sequel as it was, but it ended up being a sequel, starting where the last one finished. Oh, and about the title of Quantum of Solace, Craig would later say the title was chosen more or less at random, with him saying that most Bond movie titles are meaningless anyway, and they hoped it would sound intriguing. As strange as some of Fleming's Bond titles might sound, most do have a connection to the actual story, and are somewhat relevant. The title, Quantum of Solace, didn't really connect with the script they had at the time, and the revenge story elements that actually made the title relevant were last-second additions. They never mentioned this at the press conference. This is why it's almost pointless to listen to all the hype, the promotional interviews, the press conferences, all that jazz with big upcoming movies. They're just feeding fans whatever they can to sell the movie and generate excitement and buzz.
Actually come back from shooting Superman 4, and I'm very proud of it.
We didn't want to, mess it up the third time.
See, I think it's the most reality-based movie we've done so far.
We do it the old-fashioned way, real live action. We didn't do a lot of CGI on the stunt stuff.
It's not a bad film. Not a bad film. It sometimes entertaining. Trying to be humble.
We have to wait a few years to get the real story.
If I disappointed them in any way, then I really want to apologize.
Quantum was a step back in this reinvention of Bond. After the cataclysmic train wreck that was Die Another Day, the series bounced back with Casino Royale, so expectations were relatively high with what was going to come next. But the series once again bottomed out with one of the weakest and most disheartening Bond adventures. Now fans weren't sure if Casino Royale would be the exception to Craig's Bond, or the norm. Did he just luck out with a great Bond film to start with, and the rest of his tenure would be subpar follow-ups, not coming close to the superiority of his first outing? With only 2 films, it was impossible to determine just how the overall quality of the Craig reconstruction would be. Fans had a lot of questions, one being if the Craig films would continue this sequel pattern, and the organization of Quantum would reappear and become the new Spectre, threatening the world in subsequent films. Would Quantum actually become a fearsome presence in the movies? Unlike the quick 2-year gap between Casino Royale and Quantum, sinister forces were already gnawing away behind the scenes that would result in making 007 sit out of the movie game for much longer and cause Craig to take an unexpected hiatus. MGM found itself in financial trouble and near bankruptcy with over $4 billion in debt. Work on Bond 23 would be suspended. Concerns started to arise of when or if Bond would ever return to movie screens. And if this extended delay were to continue, would Craig be back in his tux? Or would he make an early departure, much the same way as Dalton did, leaving behind a 2-film Bond legacy? Finally, on November 3rd, 2011, 50 years to the day when Sean Connery was first announced as the first James Bond, the announcement of Bond 23 was revealed to the world. With a director with no previous big-budget action experience, a strange-sounding title, a film that would celebrate 50 years of the series' history, and Daniel Craig returning for his 3rd performance as 007, fans would undoubtedly be a bit more skeptical at the excitement and confidence the filmmakers had for Bond 23.
No one really thought that we were going to get to 50 years of Bond.
Well, working with Sam is a dream come true.
I thought the story was fantastic. I love Daniel, I love Judy, and I wanted a huge challenge.
In doing a third one and being given and being lucky enough to get the chance to do a third one, it was my intention to sort of make the best Bond movie that we possibly could, and Bond with a capital B.
We had heard all these promises before.
You're going to get a phone call in a minute. Would you mind telling them I'm headed for Cairo?